Well, thanks for joining me as we both continue to be challenged to become the best leaders God has intended us to be. We want to look at a secular example of leadership, and then we want to look at the greatest leadership manual that was ever created, and that will be God's Word, so that we can get the best leadership advice. So I want to thank you for giving me 5 to 7 minutes so that we can continue to grow in our leadership ability. We're working through this book by John Maxwell. It's called The Laws of Leadership, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And this week we want to talk about the law of the inner circle. We've all heard this saying before: there's no I in team, and we know it takes more than one individual to run a business, an organization, or a church. Now, in the church, we know ultimately that Jesus, He is the one that's going to build His church, and that's in Matthew chapter 16. But there are things on earth that we can do to either help or hinder the building of the church, and we want to be able to learn leadership principles so that we can continue to further the gospel of Jesus in our town and then ultimately around the world. Today we want to study the law of the inner circle, and it reminded me of the importance of the team mindset as we look at the church. Oftentimes we get more done, and we get it done quicker, and we even get it done more efficiently than if we would ask someone else to do it. But then that's not really helping us equip leaders and continue to raise up the next generation of leaders. So let's look at this idea of team as we lean into the quotes and then into Scripture. And I want to switch it up this week. I want to look at the verse first, and then I want to look at the quote second. So Jesus set this example of having an inner circle. Jesus, He spoke to thousands, and He had 12 disciples, and we know that, and we know them. But out of those 12 disciples, Jesus had an inner circle of 3 men: Peter, James, and John. These 3 disciples, they got to witness miracles that nobody else got to witness. They got to see the transfiguration, which is where we're at in Mark chapter 9. Also, Peter, James, and John, they got invited to go with Jesus to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's just a few instances of how Jesus equipped and He brought in this idea of the inner circle to His disciples. Because of Jesus' inner influence on these 3 men, Peter, James, and John, they became the pillar of the early church. And these 3 men, they caused the revival that happened, and they were able to preach and do miracles so that people would believe in the life, the death, and the resurrection, the good news, the gospel of Jesus. And so we see here in Mark chapter 9 that 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, and He led them up the high mountain to be alone. So it's the 4 of them. And then Jesus is transformed, and His appearance was transformed. We see this, that Jesus took time to really put into these 3 men to continue to bring out of them the leadership that was in them. So with that in mind, let's look to John Maxwell's quote, because I believe that this is where John Maxwell got this law of the inner circle, was from the example that Jesus set. See, our challenge comes from this quote by Maxwell. He says the leader finds the greatness in the group, and he or she helps the members find it themselves. You see, what happens is when we get in leadership, we get so busy, we have things to do. And you watching, I know that you all volunteer. And sometimes it's just quicker and it's easier to do it yourself than it is to cast a vision, to talk about the steps to get it done, and then help them walk through it, and then go and make the minor corrections to get the product that you wanted, especially when it comes to the church. But we want to be leaders that help find the greatness in people and help develop them. We want to be able to equip the saints for works of service. So I believe the challenge comes from this quote. Are you developing leaders as you lead? If so, if you say yes, how are you taking time to intentionally build into them? How are you taking time to intentionally build into your inner circle? Who gets a behind-the-scenes look at how you do things, or why you do things, or why you do things a certain way? Who are you intentionally mentoring? From Jesus' example, he intentionally mentored Peter, James, and John. He spent the most time with those three guys. So he equipped the 12, but he really intentionally mentored Peter, James, and John. Oftentimes, people are hesitant to step into leadership position. I ask people, would you do this? And they don't want to do it. They are afraid because they see the huge mountain that they have to climb. But however, we climb a mountain one step at a time. We put one foot in front of another, and we break it down to say, would you come this far with me? And we break it down into tasks. But that takes time, that takes effort, that helps people understand that they are leaders and that they have gifts and talents that God has given them. It takes time for us to be able to do that for them. So the question of application I have on this Wednesday is, who can you invite into your inner circle? What would be the first thing that you would teach someone in your inner circle? You may say, I already have people in my inner circle. Well, then the second question I have is, what would you teach them? What are the 2 or 3 things that they have to know if you were gone that they could keep the ministry going? It's a great question that you can ask yourself, because we want to help develop people into leaders, because that's the example that Jesus called us to do. If I can help you in any way, please reach out. And as always, I am very thankful for your willingness to lead at the church. I'm thankful that you give me these 5 to 7 minutes as we both learn about leadership. Now let's be the greatest leaders that we can be, so that God gets all the glory and the gospel gets spread around our town. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.